Many years ago, a thought arose in my mind that soon turned into a formulated idea. This idea is incredibly simple, so simple in fact that if ultimately true, it will be ironic, for reasons that will hopefully soon become evident. Nevertheless, over the years, I have found it incredibly difficult, actually impossible, to convey the idea to other people. I say impossible because out of the numerous people I have tried explaining it to over the years, friends, family, strangers, not a person yet has had a clue as to what I was on about. I also tried in vain to research the idea on the internet. Again, a very difficult task, largely due to the idea's obscurity and not having a name for it. I started to think that perhaps I had developed a truly original idea, but without the ability to explain it coherently, perhaps I would remain the only person who would know it. Eventually, I came across a talk by Alan Watts in which he explicated the idea in his usual cogent and poetic way, and far more effectively than any of my dismal attempts. Some years later, I came across an academic paper by Thomas Clark called Death, Nothingness, and Subjectivity. In this paper, he also explicated the idea, but in a far more academic and rigorous fashion than Watts, utilizing a number of thought experiments. Importantly for me, he also coined a name for the idea: generic subjective continuity. Since the dawn of the human mind's capacity for reflective thought, man has pondered the mystery of what lies beyond death. What really happens to us as conscious individuals when the electricity powering our brains is finally switched off? It really is a perennial mystery, perhaps our greatest mystery. But perhaps, like many of the hard problems in life, the answer is rather simple, and this simplicity is ironic. I believe that the idea of generic subjective continuity is an extremely convincing proposition for what happens when we die. I believe the answer to this great mystery, that has hidden itself from us since the dawn of man, is in fact laying under only the very thinnest of veils, ready to be discovered with only the slightest hint of intuition in the right moment, followed by the lightest touch of reason. Now, the problem with explaining generic subjective continuity to people is that most confuse and conflate it with conventional ideas of rebirth and reincarnation, which it is not. There is no transmigration of a soul or conscious identity. It is in fact an entirely naturalistic idea that assumes consciousness arises from brain processes. The difficulty in explaining the idea is largely due to the paradoxical nature of it and the forced use of pronouns such as I and you when attempting to articulate it. So, consider this. You exist, don't you? And by existing, I mean that you are having an experience. And this experience is within a central locus of attention and awareness that you identify as yourself. In fact, all you have ever known is experience of some sort. Isn't that right? Because you cannot have an experience of non-experience. All you have ever known is being alive, being aware, being conscious. We all wonder what happens after death, whether the lights just go out forever, whether nothingness will stretch out into eternity. But hitherto, you have not known nothingness, only experience. Now think about this. Before you were born into this realm, you did not exist, did you? When I say you, I mean the pattern of atoms that make up the configuration of your individual and ongoing being through time, and the consciousness that goes with it. You did not exist. In regards to you, there was nothing, except for a universe of which you were not yet a conscious individual being within. You did not exist, and then here you happen to be, a conscious being with a sense of self, pondering the universe and existence, and thinking that your conscious experience is just a blip of light between two eternal nights. Now, think about when you die. What happens when you die? What is the state of affairs? Well, for all intents and purposes, things are back to how they were before you were born. Yes, we can say that the universe is in a different arrangement to before you were born and died. But in regards to you being a particular arrangement of atoms having a central locus of experience as a conscious identity and now not, this is essentially the same state of affairs as before you were born, isn't it? Now, what happened the last time you did not exist? A being arose that had a conscious experience within a central locus of awareness, resulting in the sense of I that you are having now, feeling like you are alive for the first time, and from your perspective, the center of the universe, essentially. And if it happened that time, could it not happen again? Now, I don't mean you arising again as the same arrangement of atoms, the same person. No, I mean another conscious entity of some type, it could be any, will arise that will be having a conscious experience from a central locus of awareness as you are having now. And when I say as you are having now, again, I don't mean you with your current memories and personality and sense of identity. I mean as you now, as an entity having a centralized conscious experience from its own perspective. In the case of a human with a complex brain, it could be thinking that it is alive and aware for the first time and wondering what happens after death, just as you are now. Or it could be any organism with lesser capabilities for conscious thought and experience. Whatever the entity is, it is true that it is alive for the first time, and it is also untrue. It is like Alan Watts himself said, after you die, other beings will be born, of all kinds, and you are all of them. Only you can only experience them one at a time. Just as you are having a centralized conscious experience now, after having been born out of nothing, so again, after you die, another being will arise out of that nothing, and will have a centralized conscious experience, as you are having now. Again, not the same personal you as now, but the same experience of some form of consciousness from a centralized local perspective. This is why it is generic. Generic, subjective continuity. This is a paradoxical idea. If true, it is a paradoxical situation of existence from the perspective of conscious identity. I will reiterate that this is not reincarnation. Now, the next few things I have to say are quite dark and potentially frightening. If this is not something you are comfortable with, then please do not continue to listen to what I have to say. There is a beautiful part from Shakespeare's play Hamlet, and it goes like this. To sleep, perchance to dream. Ah, there's the rub. For in that sleep of death, what dreams may come, when we have shuffled off this mortal coil, must give us pause. I believe this beautiful insight from Shakespeare aligns with what is potentially quite disturbing about generic subjective continuity. If generic subjective continuity is true, then essentially there is no respite from conscious experience. And in an eternal universe or universes, the implications of generic subjective continuity and probability is that we will live all forms of lives forever and ever. We will live the best of lives, the worst of lives, and everything in between. Grand Slam tennis champions, movie stars, models, kings and queens, slaves, peasants, a man on the rack, and a factory farmed chicken. Just yesterday, I saw a man sentenced to 25 years in prison for a DUI charge that resulted in a tragic death. That man's reality is in the cards for all of us as the universe rolls dice with conscious experience forever and ever. There's the rub, and it must give us pause.